We are moving forward with our program, and we are going to marketing and branding your association. We have Ron Marcus joining us from the San Diego County Bar Association, Heather Folker from the Colorado and Denver Bar Associations, and Karen Korr from Full Korr Press. So welcome to you all.
Hi there, thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Is Growth Zone going to say something first?
Yeah, I'm here. I can say something quick.
Okay, sorry about that. I wasn't sure if you were before or after, so.
Sure. Well, yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm with Growth Zone, and as William mentioned, this is the Welcome to Marketing and Branding Your Association. We are the sponsor of the event, and thank you, Katie and Fola, for allowing us to sponsor this session. Before we start, I'd like to just tell you a little bit more about how my organization specifically helps law associations or bar associations, but law associations mainly for all of you in Ontario. And for those of you that are association professionals, I'm sure you're constantly working on two core objectives. One is that you want to grow memberships, and two, I guess, is that you want to improve member engagement. And that's two of the things that we help a lot with at Growth Zone. So we don't only help you grow, we help you grow faster by automating your sales and marketing processes. We have tools that will help increase your outreach, but also decrease the amount of time and efforts that's needed. So you can build customizable email campaigns and ensure that information goes out to your prospects and members at the right times. And then I also mentioned member engagement, which is big right now. We'll help keep your members engaged, which will in turn lead to better retention and allowing you to keep members longer. All your members can interact with one another using our robust member engagement forum. And then we have a great event management platform to help with all the virtual events you have going on now. And when we go back to in-person events, we also have a great staff and member app to help you engage with your members on the go. If any of you want to learn more, feel free to contact me. And we did also send an email gift card offer before the show. Yeah, thanks again for allowing me to sponsor, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from how to market and brand your association.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So I'll turn it over to Ron and Karen. And
all right, and Heather as well. Heather, pleasure to meet you sort of in person for the first time. It's kind of fun. So really quick, I'm Ron Marcus. I am the marketing director over at the San Diego County Bar Association. And I know Karen really well. And she's my predecessor at the bar before she went off on her own, doing all the things that she's doing. And maybe she can talk really briefly about that in a second. And I'm also joined by Heather Folker, who is from the Colorado Denver Bar Association. And I was looking her up. She's been there for 20 years. So when it comes to, sorry about that, Heather, but when it comes to marketing and branding, she's seen it all. And so has Karen. I've been here at the bar. Actually, today is my 2-year anniversary. So I've seen a few things, but I've been in the marketing and branding field for 31 years. So hopefully some of that pays off today. But maybe I could jump to Karen really quick, and you can share a little bit about where, what was going on when you were at the bar and what you're doing right now.
Sure, thanks, Ron. So as Ron said, I was his predecessor at the San Diego County Bar. I spent 11 years as the director of communications there, and previously did consulting in PR for law firms and bar associations, and professional associations, and then kind of got into the bar world. And now I do PR and marketing consulting for anyone sort of in the legal space, but a lot of work for bar associations in particular. And in my time at the San Diego County Bar Association, I was particularly active as a volunteer for the National Association of Bar Executives, which is now a client, but that's also how I met Heather. And so we've been on several panels and done this several times before. We were both in leadership in the communications section.
And how about you, Heather? Tell us about your experience.
Sure. Like you mentioned, Ron, I've been at the Colorado and Denver Bar Associations for over 20 years now, which it just flew by. It seems like a crazy number. But obviously I love it there. I lead a team that includes membership, marketing, communications, publications. So a pretty broad range of different talents there and different ways that we touch our members. I was a former communications chair for the National Association of Bar Executives as well. And that's pretty much it for me.
All right, well, that's a way to sum up a whole career in a minute and a half. But we're going to get more deep into it. And I'd like to kick things off a little bit. My background is heavily focused on branding, and brand is something that is often misunderstood until someone gets into branding. And often people sort of equate branding with the very outward appearance of an organization. So things like graphical elements, a logo, a tagline, how things look. But at its core, and I'm sure a lot of you are well familiar with this, that brand is really the sum total of the entire experience that a customer or a potential customer has with your organization, from soup to nuts. And that is everything from how your customer service works, to how well your product works, to how easy or hard it is to buy something or to get help when something isn't working. And of course, all those things we mentioned, like logo and tagline and all that, it's everything. And brand, if you take something that's fairly commodity and you want to differentiate it, so you've got 5 competitors and you all basically offer the same thing at a similar price point with the same benefits, how do you stand out? And the way to do that is with brand. You create an emotional connection with your members. It's an intangible that cannot be replicated by another organization. It's the way you treat your customers, and it's the values that you represent as an organization. So that's a real top line summary of what brand can do for you. And as a bar association, you may think that you have a captive audience, or that there really isn't, competition per se. But in a way there is, because there's all kinds of things competing for lawyers' time or other members of the legal community. And so in order to stand out as something that they value, that they're willing to pay for, and they're willing to engage with your products, services, and events and CLEs and whatnot, you have to build that connection. And so everything that you do and all the things that we're talking about today really are in service of the total brand experience, the total customer experience. Some people know that as CX, customer experience. It's all intertwined. And so everything about how you run your association feeds into that as well. So I wanted to kick it off with that because it's a great lens and a filter with which to look at everything that you're doing, not only from a communication standpoint, but everything your bar does and how it does it. And ultimately, brand is what your members say it is. It's not what you say it is. So you make a promise, you need to deliver on that promise, and then they need to actually experience it the way you want them to. But they'll tell you if it's not working. So with that said, I will now segue into being a moderator instead of a speaker. And we have a whole list of stuff that we're going to go down here. Actually, you know what I'd like to do, if it's all right? I'd like to kind of hear from Karen and Heather your thoughts on brand and how you've integrated that, with your time at your respective bars. And now too, Karen, with your clients.
Fabulous. Well, I think, when I think of brand, I always go back to this quote from Jeff Bezos, that's something along the lines of, your brand is what your customers say about you when you leave the room. And so it's really, as you said, it's about the feeling. And I think particularly in this past year and a half of COVID, what the bar associations I've been working with have been focusing on is the feeling, right? How do they feel about us? Because a lot of the products that we normally offer, such as in San Diego, where there's office space and that sort of thing, aren't available. And so I think, kind of across the board, most professional associations really are about community and shared resources and that sort of thing. And so a lot of the associations I'm working with are really trying to sort of integrate that into their messaging, that this is sort of all about community. I also think that it's really important to define your brand and have a brand statement and even some sort of core values, because consistency is one of the most important elements of brand. And I think you want people who are your ambassadors, whether they're your board members or just super active volunteers, to kind of know what your message platform is and how you talk about what it is that your association offers that differentiates it from others.
Yeah, I agree with Karen. you know, back in the day, we used to try to do everything and be everything for everyone. And especially over the past few years, and most especially this last year, we've really narrowed it down to our key things that we found our members most find value in, and that is being a community. You know, our selling point is that we are the largest community in the state of Colorado of legal professionals. So if you want to meet people who can help your career, we're the place. You know, our tagline is your partner in law. And so that's sort of the thing that we go over and over again is we're here to help you. We're here to help you succeed and get where you need to go. So that's been our brand over the years. And we did actually develop an elevator pitch for our leadership. So it has 6 points, which is way too much for an elevator ride. But we always tell them that, you know, find the one that, you know, find the one of the 6 points that really speaks to you and that you're passionate about, and use that as your selling point to a non-member. And that's been really helpful for them because our leaders really don't know how to sell membership. They know why they're a member, but you know, they don't know why other people are a member or why a non-member isn't a member. So it's really helpful for them to have that.
So one thing I really like that you said, Heather, about trying to do all things for all people. And I like to say that if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for everything. And I think that's something that a lot of organizations fall prey to, and bar associations are no exception, trying to offer every kind of service and make every kind of appeal to every possible kind of member. And I think that recognizing that you may not be the association for everybody to meet everyone's needs and focus on what you're really good at delivering will make your brand for those people that much stronger. So excellent. Absolutely, Karen talked about brand consistency. And, you know, the reason that consistency is so important is that if you act inconsistently, that's how you lose trust. People come to know you because you act a certain way every single time. You say the same things every single time. Your service delivery is perfect every single time. And if you start to vary, people then wonder, what are you? Where's the consistency? And that's how you lose trust. That's why even just how you communicate and how you portray your brand and the customer experience needs to be 100% consistent. So great point, Karen. Thanks for that. So why don't we jump a little bit more into member recruitment? Because Heather, you mentioned that leadership often doesn't know exactly how to sell membership. So how do you, Heather and Karen, develop messaging strategies? And even, you know, more than that, how do you develop the right mix of offerings to attract members?
Yeah, so we do have the elevator pitch because word of mouth is the best marketing out there, as we should all know. And hopefully our leadership is doing that work for us, and we keep trying to push them to do that. You know, we do a lot of email campaigns. One of the things that we're lucky with in Colorado is that everybody has to take one of our CLE courses in order to be licensed. So that because of that professionalism class, we have a database full of every attorney's information in Colorado, which is a great resource for us. So we do a lot of marketing campaigns, trying to do different types of offerings based on different groups. Right now we're working on the largest group that we have a hard time attracting and retaining is the government attorneys, or those in public practice. So we have a hard time finding value for them, especially if they're planning on staying in government practice. So we're trying out a new 3-month trial, we interviewed a few of our really active government attorneys and found out why, you know, they stay active. So we're going to highlight things like leadership training, leadership opportunities, access to justice opportunities throughout that 3-month trial. We really try to get them engaged that way so that, you know, when the 3 months is up, that hopefully they can find some value.
And I would just add that I think when it comes to recruitment, one message doesn't necessarily serve all audiences. So what I've kind of been looking at is this sort of member-centric approach. So as opposed to saying, you know, the association does X, Y, and Z, it's what does the member need from us? How can we help? How can we make their lives easier? So if you've surveyed your members and found out that what they really want is more of this wellness, mental health education, or what they really want are resources regarding diversity. Those are, two really big topics, at least here in San Diego, and I think nationally in the US as well. How can you provide that, and how in your recruitment materials can you show that you provide that? Is it saying, last year we brought in 10 speakers on these topics and members said X, Y, and Z? And also sort of how do you differentiate your member needs? So for example, a government attorney in San Diego doesn't need CLE credit. They get that sort of through their organization. Same thing with a lot of the big firm lawyers. But for a small solo, and I think you guys call it something different, so CLE, continuing legal education credits. But for a solo attorney, this may be the only place that they go, or they may rely on the bar providing this programming, or in the case of the San Diego County Bar, providing an office space for them when we can all go back to work. So I think not being afraid to segment your message as opposed to sort of blanket sending out a renewal message because it's renewal time and just screaming with a megaphone, renew now, is really important. I would try to get a specific and tailor your message to the member needs as much as you can.
So I'd like to get to that point in a second, Karen, because that's a big one. I wanted to ask either of you, Heather, you said you had the advantage of having a CLE that everybody in Colorado must take, which I wish we had that built-in advantage. But I'm wondering if you could conceive of a CLE. So we're a voluntary bar, all our CLEs are voluntary, and so we compete. And I'm not with you, but we compete. And so I'm wondering, is there some kind of CLE that is so attractive that we could offer, that any bar could offer, that even if it's not mandatory to take it from us, people would want to take it anyway? And I'm asking that as a relative newbie to the legal world. So do you have any thoughts on that, either of you?
I can't think of one unless it's mandatory.
I will say I've done some work for a couple associations other than the San Diego County Bar Association, and the sellout CLE is always the how do you become a judge? So that may just be because it's something where people don't understand the process, but I've spoken on a couple of those just about the process and writing in the application, and I know it's probably different, but that's something that always draws a big crowd. And also, from my experience with NABI and from my experience with the San Diego County Bar, what people really want is the nuts and bolts. So while they may want diversity and there may be a credit assigned to hearing about diversity, it's okay, what can I implement right now? So give me 4 steps. Do I create a diversity pledge? Do I recruit? What does that look like? So I think anything that's really sort of in the details and how can I implement something, as opposed to sort of the broad 30,000-foot view of this is what we need to focus on in diversity, has always been really popular, at least in my experience.
That is super helpful. So,
I did want to add something about the how to become a judge. Another great aspect, because we've been doing that type of programming in Colorado as well, and a great aspect about that is you can really reach out to the diverse community and encourage them to, participate, and hopefully, our bench isn't that diverse, so that's one of our initiatives.
excellent point.
Great point. And another thing, Ron, too, I'll mention, and I know we did this in San Diego, but other bars have too, is bringing in resources that they're sort of not getting through other law associations. So we brought in some reporters to talk about, if you've got a really hot case, how do you tell that to the news, and what do you need to send them, right? And how do you engage? We've brought in other branding and marketing experts on video, that sort of thing, that's not necessarily related to the law, but more about law practice management.
Yeah, I agree too. I mean, just going to throw a name out there, but Bruce Hennis, whenever he speaks for us, those programs always have a lot of attendance at them, and they do get credit, and they're really good crisis communication information our attorneys are really interested in.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Bruce Hennis is based in Ohio, I think, and he's a crisis communications person, and he's done, I think every bar in the country has had him in the US at some point at one of their bigger events, but he's also a speaker for the National Association of Bar Executives, and he does a really good job of doing, I think it's an hour presentation, but it's fantastic.
I think I've had the pleasure of hearing him at a NABI conference. So I think this is the first time that I've ever gotten to moderate something where I was busy taking notes because you guys are providing such great information. So selfishly, I'm happy to be here. Okay, so Karen, you talked about tailoring the message to the market, and the market is obviously striated. And so I think one of the challenges from more of a tactical standpoint is how to best segment your market and then be able to create campaigns and send those. And of course, the more that things can be automated, the easier that is. We have a staff of 4 here, but we're still finding it very difficult to even do the basics of marketing automation and drip campaigns and things like that. And part of it is because of our association management system. It has certain limitations. And from what I understand, talking to people at other bars, like every AMS has its limitations and no one is fully happy with whatever they're using. And I came from another world where I had my pick of incredibly robust tools that could do whatever the heck I wanted. So it was kind of an awakening for me coming into the bar world with what we had to contend with. So I'd like to hear from both of you about your thoughts, and especially, Karen, 11 years and Heather, 20, how you've sort of attacked segmentation and being able to create campaigns and possibly automate them so that you can do more.
So I would love to hear if anybody is really pleased with their AMS. I've never talked to that person before. We use Higher Logic, and they recently purchased Informs and Real Magnet, which are 2 sort of automation email marketing softwares. So, it is really helpful for us. Once we get a campaign set up, we just throw names into it and it just auto sends. Like, for instance, when people join the bar for the first time, we do a year-long welcome campaign. So people are added to that campaign automatically because of the connection between Higher Logic and our database. So we really, after we got it set up, we don't have to do anything except for go in and look at reports every once in a while. So that saves us a ton of time. But as far as automating and segmenting, we haven't really gotten there. Right now, that's all manual. When we send our renewal messages, as we were kind of touching on before, we send a different message to a new attorney versus a senior attorney getting in that retirement area, or somebody who's a solo or small firm practitioner, because that's our bread and butter, as it is, I think, for most associations that are voluntary. And so we definitely segment our messages. And of course, when we're marketing our CLEs, we're only going to send family law programs to family law attorneys. And that is one thing on our database. We have a taxonomy system so that we know, even if they're not a member of that practice area section, we know if they've taken a family law course before, then we can market to them.
That's good. And I'll just ask before Karen goes, did you have any challenges with connecting Higher Logic with your AMS so that they could share data and then you could more easily segment people based on the actions they are taking?
Not that I know of, but I wasn't involved in that process. So I didn't hear much about it. So I'm assuming that things went pretty smooth.
Well, I am glad.
We're on Euclid ClearVantage, so I don't know if the type of AMS that we have makes a difference, but.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
How about you, Karen?
I don't have anything to add with regards to sort of the automation and the AMS piece of that, because Heather's right. There's not a single person I've met either that's happy with their AMS. But I will say that one of the tools that I like to use a lot is Facebook and LinkedIn. They allow you to create groups. And I know we'll probably talk about social media later, but whenever I'm presenting to lawyers about social media and why it's important to have a social media presence, I always say nobody's going to spend more money on search engine optimization than LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, right? Your law firm is never going to beat them. So if you're trying to get a message out to a certain group of people and that group of people exists on Facebook, that's a really good place to post as well. So I think we all kind of look at our email marketing campaigns as the best way to get information out. And it largely is, in my experience. That's what kind of converts to signups and registration, but just remembering that there are sort of other mediums out there where you can hit a targeted group of people. And one of the things that I did way back in the day at the San Diego County Bar was after we got survey results and we were looking at, okay, what can we provide small solos? What are our benefits for new attorneys? I created 4 or 5 talking points for each group that we segmented. So if somebody in membership and not in communications was going to develop a letter, they could look at those 4 talking points and say, okay, I've got to incorporate these, right? And then we were all sort of on the same page about how we talk to each group about each different thing. And the board received our talking points, but none of the talking points were intended to be repeated verbatim. It was more so a guide. This is what this is the voice we're gonna use when we're talking to solos or new attorneys or government attorneys. So I think that was super helpful just to have it all sort of in one place and ready to pull when we needed it.
Great, great. And still largely a manual process. And since you went there, I'm going to segue to social media. I think email marketing, we can all agree, is probably the first and foremost marketing tactic that we all use, followed by other forms of communication as resources allow and as effectiveness dictates. So social media is, in our experience at the bar since Karen left, so maybe we need to get you back, but it's been kind of a tough nut to crack. And we've had a struggle with trying to increase engagement, get more followers, but also trying to decide what sorts of things to post and how to use that as a tool to reach more members and also more potential members. So I'd love to hear from both of you in your experience, strategies that have worked for you and how social fits in your overall marketing mix.
I can start. I think that in all the social media that I've done with my current clients and with the San Diego County Bar, the posts that perform the best are the ones where people recognize other members of their community, right? So I'll give an example, not to use Heather, but for the National Association of Bar Executives, we did a kudos column and we congratulated people recently on their anniversaries, or there was one of our board members was elected to a prominent position. I can't remember what it was, but in their own community. And so there were 4 or 5 people that we sort of called out in this graphic and we said, kudos to these 5 members, and sort of had their headshots. And that was the most engaged with post we've had on any platform. So again, it kind of, it highlights that community aspect of what we do, but it also, I mean, people like seeing their friends and their colleagues and people that they know doing great things, and that creates a lot of engagement. But also I've always aligned the social media strategy with the general marketing strategy. So if we're saying, okay, in marketing, these are the messages we need to take home, and this is the content our members need, whether that's about law practice management and diversity, wellness, the bench, media relations, whatever those sort of segments are, I would kind of schedule that out as part of our social media. So, it was always Tech Tuesday. And every Tuesday we'd provide a technology article. I'd usually do something about diversity on Fridays. And then I would do some promotion of the bar in between. And I think, one of the greatest tips that I got on social media and what I kind of like to follow is that social media isn't a megaphone for your bar association. If it is, no one's going to pay attention because you already have access to your members. It's more about creating thought leadership. And so that's how I kind of look at it. I look at it as thirds. We've got 1/3 of our posts being about our association. 1/3 is sort of this thought leadership piece. And the other one is about connecting in community. So that may be sharing the post of another law related organization or an article that a lawyer wrote that may be relevant to other people, but really not looking at it as 3 different buckets as opposed to just whatever you need to promote for the bar association going out on social media.
Yeah, we're kind of in the same thought as Karen at the Colorado Denver Bar Associations. We have the luck of having a social media specialist on staff, and she actually maintains, I think it's like 12 different social media channels, which just sounds like a lot, and it is. And it's so interesting when I think back when we first started doing social media, we were begging for content, and now we have so much content and it just comes to us organically, which is so nice. A lot of it is from different groups trying to get something promoted. So we, as Karen said, we have to make sure that we're balancing the type of content that we're putting out there with, community and information that our members are going to find useful. It has been really successful mode for us to communicate. Our leadership are looking at it all the time, apparently, because they'll be like, why didn't that post go up yet? So that is good news. And we definitely coordinate it, as Karen was saying as well, with, whatever we're trying to push out. So if we have a statement from the president's going out via email, then we're also going to be pushing that out on social media as well at the same time.
And what about social media as a two-way engagement tool, as opposed to simply pushing out messages? Does your social media specialist, Heather, have the time, and does that person, do they regularly respond to comments, engage with people on posts and that kind of thing? And what has that done for you? Yes,
she does. So we're always looking for those ones that we can create the most engagement with. So yeah, photos, like Karen was saying, photos of members where we can tag them, and then somebody is commenting or sharing. She definitely does spend some time responding. We do get a lot of those questions from the public coming into our Facebook, or mostly our Facebook inbox. And she deals with those as well.
So I've always thought, and we haven't had enough resource time to really do this yet, but I've always kind of felt like being able to spend that time to respond to people and have dialogues and conversations within those posts really helps drive engagement and really ultimately builds that branding piece, that connection, that emotional connection. Has that been your experience as well?
Yes, it has been. And I'm sorry, my cat's going to join us for a little bit too. So you'll probably see her pop in and out.
There he is. I have two cats too, but I've got my doors closed right now. So they're taking naps anyway. They're more nocturnal. So excellent. Okay. Why don't we jump to, because I know Karen this is one of her fortes, and perhaps you too, Heather, PR and what role PR plays. And I imagine there's several audiences. There's your internal bar audience, there's the wider community, and then there's just the general public, and the messages are different, and what you highlight is different, and who you talk to about it is different. So what are your suggestions for PR strategy? What's worked for you? And please enlighten us.
Well, I will say so much of PR and media relations is really the relationships that you form with reporters. So there's an example, there's a publication in San Diego called the Daily Transcript, and it's mostly law and real estate, but skews more towards real estate. And they had a new law reporter, and we were having a big event, our annual event the next day. And so I invited him to come, and he did. And I kind of introduced him around the legal community, and then continued to invite him to events. Ron, you probably know him, Lyle. And now he's a reporter for the ABA Journal. And so when I've got stories, I talk to Lyle about what I've got for the ABA Journal. He hosts the Legal Rebels podcast. And we've got a great relationship. We get together for coffee and just talk about sort of, well, in the pre-COVID world, we got together for coffee and would talk about just kind of what's going on, what he's seeing, what I'm seeing. And so I think building relationships is really great, and not just sending a press release when you have something to announce and expecting that the publication is going to pick it up. If they've never heard from you, if they don't know who you are, it's not as likely that you're going to get any coverage. But also, a lot of times I found that the information we were providing was also educational for lawyers. So for example, there was a program that we did called Coffee with Counsel. And every month we'd have an attorney in a different area of law talking to the public and answering basic questions about family law, elder law, personal injury, that sort of thing. And I would always, and we also broadcast that live on Facebook. So that was sort of the social media element. But I always let reporters know. And at the first one, I think we had 4 reporters in the audience. So we had almost as many reporters as we had people from the public or lawyers. And so I kind of look at, again, how can we help them? Why would someone in the press? Why does a reporter want to hear from the San Diego County Bar? So any opportunity I had to sort of build a relationship or provide education, so they knew that they could come to us for those sorts of stories, was really helpful.
Yeah, we actually have a list of experts for media calls. That's a great way for you to get that relationship built up and the trust there. We'll have reporters will come to me now and say, I'm working on this and would love to just talk with an expert in this area so I can just find out some more information on this area of law or this case. And so we do that a lot for the reporters, and that really helps us build that relationship. But just like Karen said, I mean, you're just not successful if you're just sending out like a blanket press release and to unknown people that you're expecting to pick it up. It just doesn't work that way anymore. I don't know if it ever did.
That's a great point, Heather. And I will say that in my time at the San Diego County Bar, not so much anymore, but I would say we got about 2 calls a week for experts. And a lot of times it wasn't something they wanted the Bar Association to speak on. They just needed someone on family law to be on the news at 6 and talk about a celebrity divorce, right? Or something to that effect. So we would help them out. But what I do now for my clients, especially those in smaller law firms, is put together profiles and then send that to the media and say, if you're ever looking for a source, please add this person to your database. And I found that that's really effective as well.
That's a great suggestion. And I'm glad you both brought this subject up because we've talked about it. And, we get that occasional call. We need someone, there's a breaking case and we need this expert on this. And we've toyed with the idea, but not implemented yet, what we call a speakers bureau of that list of experts. And then, of course, we want to make sure, they're not speaking on behalf of the bar, they're speaking on behalf of themselves. But at the same time, since they're being referred by the bar, what they do matters. It reflects on the bar if we're a good source of references or not. So, what sorts of standards should we have, or any kind of media training? How do we vet people to be on that short list of people we're going to call and have at the ready? Have you both dealt with that, and what suggestions do you have?
We have not. We just remind those people that are our experts that they are not speaking on behalf of us. I know that it could be implied that they are by the reporter, but we haven't had any issues.
We've also, we've made it very clear. And then, I'm not an attorney, but I've worked with so many that I know that I've got to put everything in writing. And so as soon as a guest was confirmed on a news segment, I would send them a note, and I would send the producer a note, or the director or the reporter, whoever I was working with, separately, and say, as we discussed, this person is not speaking on behalf of the Bar Association, but in their capacity as a criminal law attorney. Just so that was sort of abundantly clear. And I think there was a time period at the San Diego County Bar where sort of the first right of refusal to speak on behalf of the bar went to the president. But if it was something really specific, like environmental law, we went to the environmental law chair and we asked them if they wanted to do it, and if not, if they wanted to designate somebody. So it was kind of like each of our section and committee leaders was the foremost expert for the bar at that time.
No, that makes really good sense. Okay, I'm gonna totally switch gears on you now. I'm gonna ask you an open-ended question. So you have a captive audience of existing members. And of course, if you're a mandatory bar, then you have a captive audience period in your state. But if you're a voluntary bar, like many of ours, then you have the members that you're hoping to keep. And then you have a lot of members, or I'm sorry, a lot of people that aren't members yet in your county or your municipality. And so what kinds of strategies can you employ, or have you found success with in terms of outreach and bringing those people in to experience the bar and join?
So trying to welcome has been very difficult during the pandemic, but obviously having large social events or small social events, any type of social event where we can include non-members so that they can then engage with our current members. Because once again, it's that word of mouth that is really the strongest selling vehicle for us. So just trying to get members and non-members together has been the best for us.
Well, I don't have any experience with this personally, but I saw a strategy yesterday that I thought was phenomenal. There's a bar association in San Diego that's probably, they've got maybe 2,000 members or so, and they reached out to recruit members or to get renewals, and their headline was, "We want to feature you." And the text of the email said, something to the effect of, our new members, we're looking forward to having more PR people, and this was, directed at me, but more PR people as part of this organization. Our new members are going to be featured monthly in our publication. We'd love to feature you in X month, right? And they said we're featuring 5 new members every month. And I think that's a really good tactic. I hadn't seen it used before, just because, hey, I'm joining, but I already know that I'm getting exposure to this bigger audience. So I thought that was something that was adaptable and might be something to consider for a recruitment kind of campaign.
I love that. I just took notes. I'll take liberty and share something that we did last year. The team came up with it together, and what we did is, and I don't know how applicable this might be for your respective bar associations, but I hope this is relevant. Here in California, you can purchase an email list or a database of all the licensed attorneys for a very low fee. And so we were able to merge that with our existing member database and see the thousands of lawyers in San Diego County who are not members. And what we did is we conceived this campaign that we called Why I Belong. And it was a first person narrative from a bunch of members, from board members on down to all kinds of members at large, representing as diverse a population as we could provide. So we had LGBTQ, we had Black, we had Asian, we had Latino. We did everything, men and women. We did everything we could to be as broad and inclusive as possible with these stories. And I would interview them and capture their thoughts. We had a standard questionnaire format. We turned that into a first person narrative. And we put this email campaign out every 2 weeks to these non-members. And we gained 200 new members out of that campaign, which during COVID year, we found to be especially significant. So that buoyed us. We reached a point where it sort of got to diminishing returns. And so we turned it off for a period of time. But that was one tactic that worked for us. But we're on the hunt for more, which is why I wanted to ask our panel for ideas in that regard. So thanks for that. That was great. All right. I'd like to turn to another tactic, which is surveys. And you mentioned surveys earlier in the program. And I find that surveys are not only good at gaining information, but also as a way to engage and have one more touch point with members. So I'd love to get your thoughts on surveys. What kinds of surveys have worked well for you? What kinds of incentives have been most successful in getting people to complete surveys? Because that's always a challenge, right? So I'd love to get your advice on that.
We've done several membership surveys over the years, and our incentive is always Amazon gift card. That seems to entice people fairly well, but you have to get up in that $100 range in order for it to be a real enticement. It can't just be $20, unfortunately, anymore. So we've done, we do, after our renewal season ends and the people that don't come back to us, we do a survey with them to try to find out, why they didn't rejoin. And then in that, as I was mentioning, that year-long new member campaign, in their first year, halfway through, we do sort of a how's it going survey. So for the drop survey, the majority of what we see is they're moving in, especially right now, they're moving into retirement as the baby boomers are moving into retirement. They've moved out of state. They don't find any use for us, or they don't find the value. That's a pretty common responses to that survey. For the how's it going in halfway through their first year, the vast majority of people are asking for ways to get engaged with the Bar Association. And so, and going a little off topic here, but I feel like the majority of our members want to be engaged, but they aren't the ones that are the go-getters are the ones that are going to find their ways to get involved with the bar. But the vast majority are not those people, and you have to make it easy for them. So we're in the midst of creating a web page that hopefully keep it updated regularly, that we can just direct them to, that says, oh, we're looking for writers and here's some topics. We're looking for new section leadership in this practice area, or we would really like to get some more committee members for this upcoming volunteer project, or it's just those sorts of things. I feel like being really specific and really highlighting some micro volunteering opportunities, then it makes it so much easier for people to get engaged. And once they're engaged, then you've probably got them as a longtime member.
Just add, I think that professional associations, bars in particular, think that a survey has to be this long thing that's approved by the board and then goes out under a special email, and it's this survey, and those have value and are important too, but really you're looking for the data. So for example, I've got a client that it puts together managing partners all over the country. It's called the Managing Partner Forum. And at the beginning of all of his webinars, he adds polling data, right? How do you think your law firm fared during COVID? And when people are registering, he asks these questions too. And so it's a really simple way to get data, because he knows he's going to have over 100 registrants, right? And 50% said XYZ, and then he sort of presents that data in the webinar. So that's one tactic. Also, Twitter and Facebook, and I'm not sure about LinkedIn, but I know for sure Twitter and Facebook offer a survey function. So you can just tweet out one question, would you rather read our magazine in print or online, right? And see what the responses are. And that's obviously, not a full survey of your membership, but it's a really informal way to get a little bit of data. And a tactic I used with another bar association was just every week they sent out a newsletter, and every week we'd attach one question to the bottom. So it was, hopefully we get people to answer, but at least we're getting some answers every week and some kind of benchmark for what we think our members are thinking about whatever topic it was. But I think that, sort of focusing in on the information you want as opposed to the mechanism is really important.
That's good advice. Yeah, I have fallen prey to that sort of thinking. We have to make this long survey and it's got to be approved. And, 10 people have their hands in finessing the questions. And, 3 months later, you finally get something out and you're waiting for responses and the whole ball of wax. So, all right. As we're progressing here, I want to, I had a question on the tip of my tongue here and I lost it. I'm going through my list of things that we talked about yesterday. Let's segue into, we mentioned diversity a little earlier. And I loved both Karen's suggestion about CLE, about how to become a judge, and Heather's suggestion about sending that to as diverse an audience as possible. And a lot of our bars are in smaller municipalities, and the demographics may be such that it might feel like it's harder to reach out to a diverse audience, or that diverse audience that we're seeking maybe is less visible. And yet they are out there. And even if they are a smaller percentage of the population, by having dedicated outreach to them, it sends a clear message that you actually are a bar that is accessible to them. And I'll give an example. When I first joined our bar, we undertook a brand audit. And that's one of the things I used to do when I was a consultant. So I got to lead this brand audit, and we invited a member who was actually not a member. One of the people that we had on the task force was a non-member, and he is Black. And he has belonged to the Black focused bar here in San Diego. But he had the notion that the San Diego County Bar Association was just not a place for him. And he didn't have any particular reason. There wasn't anything, guiding that, except for just the fact that it to him, just his preconceived notion of it is that it was not a very diverse place. Whereas he knows that the Black bar that he belongs to, he is surrounded by people that have a shared common life experience with him. And so he's guaranteed to feel at home in that environment. They're all sharing the same struggles as Black lawyers in a community where it may not be as diverse as it could be. And actually our bar has become very diverse in the last few years. So it was an eye-opener to get his perspective, and probably an eye-opener for him as well. But they're out there, and there are benefits to attracting them. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Heather and Karen, about the value of that, tactics, you know, how to reach out to them, especially if you're in a smaller locality where it may be harder to get that outreach.
Yeah, so I would actually say that we have a hard time at the Colorado bar trying to do that outreach, because we really just have Denver as the main city. And then that changes vastly when you get to, you know, the Plains or the Western Slope. And there's a lot less diversity in those areas. We have been really working hard on our relationships with our diversity bars, and growing those relationships and supporting them in events or statements that they might be making. You know, we also had a EDI rule that was just passed by our Supreme Court. So, and we were at the forefront of making that happen. And what that is it requires a certain number of continuing legal education credits per compliance period that must be in equity, diversity, and inclusivity. And that just recently passed. So that was a big co-project between us and the diversity bars in the state. So we're really happy about that. We've also tried to incorporate into our communications PR the different heritage months, and ABA has a site that lists them all. So like right now we are celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Month, and next month will be Pride Month, and then we'll also do some events and some messaging around Juneteenth as well. So those are different ways we're really trying to make it seem like everybody belongs. We definitely have that perception. It's been told to us many times that we are the old white guy bar. And you know, that is not far from the truth. So we're making a lot of changes to try to move away from that. And one of the things that I recently heard and that we learned from our diversity bars is that they felt like they were the feeders for the Colorado Bar Association's leadership. So, and they didn't like that. So that kind of took us aback a little bit. And we're like, oh, well, maybe we need to rethink now how we're looking to get our new diverse leaders instead of just pulling them from leadership positions at different diversity bars. So that was an interesting insight.
That is interesting. I almost would have thought the opposite, that by welcoming these leaders into the larger bar, that you were being more inclusive, but they saw it as, it sounds like a poaching almost.
Yes, yeah.
We actually got that feedback too, once in San Diego as well. So it's not that uncommon.
Very interesting. Now, how about you, Karen?
You know, I would say that really, at least, you know, in the San Diego community, we tried to look at it, and this has a weird connotation right now in US politics, but as this sort of big tent, right? And we were the big fish. And so we wanted everyone to sort of get into our tent. And then we realized that each of these individual diversity bars had their own initiatives, right? And they weren't the same as ours. And so we should talk to them about what they need. And a lot of times what they needed was for the bigger bar to help promote programs, right? Or they needed help finding a speaker, or they needed, you know, they wanted to collaborate. And so one of our more successful programs over the years was this Dialogue on Diversity program, where we gave every diverse bar association in San Diego equal billing as a sponsor. You know, it was presented by the San Diego County Bar in conjunction with all of the diversity bars, and we did that for free. It meant their members could come for free. So I think that was really helpful. And, you know, the only other example that I really have that's tactical, I know may not be as relevant in Canada, but here in California, we've got a lot of Spanish speakers. And so on our Spanish speaking television station, Univision San Diego, we used to do a family law, ask a lawyer type of thing twice a year. And we would do that in conjunction with La Raza Lawyers, which was the Latino bar. So I think whatever initiative you're trying to do or working on, working with the bar that best fits that initiative is really good. It's a good way to build your relationship with them and then kind of also create that media relationship if it's there. Like I said, don't know that that's super applicable for you guys, but.
Oh, I just remembered one thing I wanted to mention as well is we are doing a joint event in June for Pride Month and Juneteenth. And one of the things, it's going to be our first in-person event. So I'm really excited about that. It's going to be a picnic outside. So, but one of the things that we're going to do is do a whole campaign during the event of what it means to belong. And during the event, we're going to be walking around and asking people and interviewing them that question and then sharing it out on social media, which I'm really excited about that.
I love that whole concept of belonging, of a feeling that you belong. And this is a great segue into what was going to be my next question, because you both talked about partnering with other affinity bars. And I'd like to broaden that out to partnerships in general, how you can leverage partnerships with any kind of agency, bar, business networking group, public officials. How do you leverage that to help extend your reach, help reach more potential members and be more plugged into the community?
So one of the things that we did, and I know, Ron, you and I have talked about that, you expanding this, but we developed a relationship with the San Diego Business Journal and the Daily Transcript, which is our other sort of business publication, as I mentioned. And that was really helpful because we could kind of co-promote events. So I think having a media relationship is super helpful. But another example I was going to share too is the California Lawyers Association recently took some information that they got from a coloring book that the Missouri Bar Association did and turned it into a comic book. And it's called What Do Judges and Lawyers Do? It's really adorable. If you need it, I can send you a link. But they sort of collaborated and realized that they had similar goals and they were trying to do something visual. They got the comic idea from the San Diego County Bar because it's something that we did when I was there to talk about our lawyer referral service. And I stole that idea from Heather at the Colorado and Denver bars because they were the first people I saw do a comic book. So I think having good relationships with the other associations and talking to them about what they're doing and what will work in your market is also a really great tactic, just because my hope is, like us, you guys don't largely compete with one another. So you can share ideas and concepts and even policies freely.
I'd love to know where Heather stole the idea from.
We actually, one of our committee members said, "Oh, it'd be so fun to do a comic book." And we all looked at him like he was crazy. And then just started thinking about it more and more. And we're like, actually, I think we can do this. It was a really fun project. I'm sure a graphic designer doesn't say that, but anymore. So one of the things that we were working really hard on before the pandemic, but we will again once we get to have more in-person meetings and networking events, is working with other organizations that is like a win-win for our attorneys. So like partnering with the CPAs or partnering with the realtors, where we can bring business. It's actually a way to bring business to our members and connect those people, with what they're looking for. So it's really a win-win. And those organizations are always so excited to partner with us on a networking event. So that's been really successful. Also getting them involved with, like the young leaders associations where our attorneys can go in, and there's a lot of nonprofits that are looking for attorneys to be on their boards. So that's, another good sort of collaboration that we've been doing. Don't know that it necessarily immediately gets us memberships, but it definitely, if those members know that we got them business, then they're going to probably stay with us.
Yeah, that's planting seeds, and a lot of marketing is planting seeds. It's not immediately noticeable return, but all of that stuff is paying dividends. So I'd like to ask one final question before we open it up for other questions. I know we're coming up on the hour here. I'm just wondering, there's so much we could talk about. We could be here for many hours, and people would drop off and fall asleep. But this is our daily lives, right? I mean, this is our bread and butter. Is there anything that we didn't cover today that you would like to make sure we touch on, that you'd like to share? Anything, any thoughts that got inspired for you today as we were talking? I'll start with Karen.
No, I don't think there's anything that I had in mind for us particularly to cover today, but I will just say that, I think in my bio, you've got my email address. I love talking about bar stuff and bar strategy. So I'm always happy to discuss ideas, or, I don't think we ever really need to reinvent the wheel. So if there's something you're thinking about doing and want to run it by me, I've got a good pulse on what a lot of the US bar associations are doing. And so I'm always happy to talk about anything related to bar associations and marketing.
I feel like I think we covered pretty much everything. I think that I was interested in talking about. Just one additional thing is that we found, playful language has become kind of what our members are engaged with right now, and has been over the past few years. So we've been just really focusing in on that. And again, our social media specialist is so witty and so good with that. So we're very lucky to have her, because if it were me, it wouldn't be witty. So finding that right tone, something that is, just really engaging and playful, but still professional. It's hard to find, but when you do find it, it's really well received.
I'm really glad you shared that, Heather, because I came from a world where colloquial and playful was the order of the day. And coming into the legal world, you hit this stereotype of, no, lawyers are more stoic and more serious, and they don't have time to read fancy messages, and you just have to keep it very simple and straight. And it's nice to hear that lawyers are humans too, and they react to playful messages just like every other human being. So maybe we shouldn't be afraid to be a little bit playful while staying, within professional lanes, I guess.
Yeah, my advice is go for it.
Awesome. Well, Katie, I guess, is it time? Do we have any time for questions from?
There are no questions. You guys are good. I took so many notes, so I thought this was really helpful. So I'm hoping other people took notes, and it's recorded. So we'll have this up on our YouTube channel. I think Bill has something to say though, so I'll leave it to him.
So I want to thank our panel, and I'm delighted that you realize that we are humans. But I had a few questions come to me, more related to what we do here in Canada. But I think you've provoked some good ideas and some thoughts amongst our members, and I hope they can all take them back to their associations and perhaps implement some of those ideas, and in particular help to grow their membership. So thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
That was a pleasure. Thanks for having us. And it's great to have this cross-border sharing of ideas, and to see how much we have in common.
I agree. Thanks for having us, and hopefully one day we can do this in person.
Yeah, we'd all be delighted to come to San Diego.
Anytime.
Anytime.
We're open, no masks as of today, so exciting.
We're not quite there yet.
Did Dan have a question? I know I saw your hand raised.
A bit more of a comment. First of all, thank you for an excellent session. Needless to say, Law Pro does a lot of outreach in a similar fashion to what some of you do. We're trying to reach the same audience. So tremendous content, and I got some neat ideas and insights. So thank you to the speakers for that. We, for what it's worth at TIP, we searched far and wide for a mass email tool, and we settled on Campaigner, which I think the Law Society uses as well, which we found was fairly reasonably priced, very easy to use, and allows us to send out the mass emails that we do, including targeting and subgroups and tracking and opening of messages and so on. So throw that idea out if you're using or looking for a mass tool. Also, interesting idea in terms of using social media and tying in the wellness and balance topic. One of my staff for a long time has participated in a women's in-house council private Facebook group, and for a number of years, and it's I think a group of about 20, and they get together on a regular basis. And what has been striking to my colleague, and shared this with us in terms of observing the true impact on the profession, is how truly stressed and kind of pushed to the limit that the members of this group are, and the tremendous value that the ability to get in a group and talk and share ideas and listen to each other in terms of what people are struggling with and tips for coping, and so on, and having the benefit of knowing, you know, there's others struggling with the same thing. And it got us scratching our house in terms of what we might do. And I'm not sure lawyers across the province would be interested in joining any group sponsored by Facebook that, or by Law Pro rather, that they would talk about things like this. But the thought occurred to me that you, as local law associations in your smaller community, would have smaller groups of people, and again, you come from different size bars, but or associations would have groups of people that might be looking for a resource or a platform like that, where they could get together with colleagues and kind of discuss and share information. Again, and Facebook private groups is what this in-house group uses. There may be other ideas out there, but I tossed that idea out in case it might be of interest to anyone. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks very much, Dan.